Welcome back. Let's take a look at the front pages for you. The Daily Mirror reports on a crisis within the NHS, with experts blaming the decreasing number of GP practices on NHS cuts and a shortage of family doctors, with claims that fewer surgeries, it says, could leave patients facing long waits and push more towards A&E.
And the Telegraph reports that Donald Trump has indicated that Boris Johnson is his favourite in the race to become the next Prime Minister, calling him a good guy and a friend.
And according to a new opinion poll carried out for The Times, the Liberal Democrats have surged into first place, with the paper saying the pro-Remain party is now the most popular in the country.
Is there any other accents you're going to be throwing in?
Yeah,
there?
there'll be a few more.
There'll be a few more.
Yeah, that was my best Canadian.
Sounds like you're in Dallas. Right, joining us now is journalist and broadcaster Iain Dale, and Sue Ellen, otherwise known as Home Secretary Jacqui.
And she's an unfit mother.
Look at the shoulder pads. You need more shoulder pads.
I need more, though.
You need more.
But look, you look so happy, joyous, positive. It can only mean one thing.
I'm sitting next to Iain Dale.
No. What does it mean?
We're going to sing again.
What does it mean? What does it mean?
It means Villa are back where they belong.
Yay! Come on,
Are we
exactly.
booking guests primarily on this basis now? Is that what's happening in this programme?
Prince William will be on next time.
Yeah.
And let's talk some serious stuff.
Talking about winning ways,
Yeah.
actually, this... is it incredible? It feels incredible from what the last conversation we might have had a year ago, 18 months ago, about the Lib Dems would be like Lib Dems who. And now, this morning, YouGov poll, it's a snap question, isn't it? If there was a general election tomorrow, who would you vote for? Look at this. So the Lib Dems on 24% followed just behind them with the Brexit Party.
It sort of reflects the way that people voted, I suspect, in the Euro elections last week or whenever it was. And, of course, where the Lib Dems...
for the Lib Dems, Jacqui?
You know I'm not going to answer that question, Iain, because we've talked about it on the podcast.
We will do.
Where, of course, the Lib Dems did extremely well. The Brexit Party did even better. And the two main parties suffered for having a fudged position on Brexit, and I'm afraid I think that's what's being demonstrated here as well, particularly, I'm afraid, for my part.
But this sort of reflection of how would you vote tomorrow, you can't read. Can you read a lot into that? I mean, you know, in 6 months' time or 8 months' time, if there is a general election, this will change.
Traditionally, European elections mean nothing when it comes to general election votes, but I do think this time things might be a little bit different. And if you're Jo Swinson, who's announcing her leadership campaign today, or Ed Davey, who announced yesterday, I mean, what a great way to start a leadership campaign. It's all downhill from here.
Yes, exactly. You can only lose from this point forward.
I think, I mean, the two-party system could be finished now. I mean, I'm not saying it will be. That would be a very bold prediction to make. But you look at the state of the Conservative Party, you look at the state of the Labour Party, and you think, well, could the Brexit Party, could the Liberal Democrats become the new two-party system?
But also, some of these parties are going to have to probably work together. I mean, what's the chance of something like the Lib Dems and the Green Party joining together on, you know, and trying to share the vote?
Well, they didn't manage it in the European elections, did they? And, of course, what Liberal Democrats, of course, notoriously keen on electoral reform, and actually this gives grist to their mill, because despite that poll, the Liberal Democrats would not be the party of government because of the way that our electoral system works for elections to Westminster. So that may well, if the two-party system is falling apart, then there is an argument for electoral reform, not something that I've ever been a massive fan of for Westminster.
But then that would also mean the Brexit Party would do incredibly well as well, wouldn't it? It's interesting if you look at this. Is it a sort of rerun of the referendum? You see, it's 2% between, you know, no dealers and the Remainers, but the Remainers coming out on top in this poll.
It is in a way, but of course the turnout in the European elections was a fraction of what it was in the referendum. So, of course, you can argue it either way, depending on which side of the argument you're on. But if you look at a map of England and Wales, obviously not Scotland, the Brexit Party won every single council area, and if it was first past the post, they would have got 442 seats in Parliament. Now, I mean, you know, you can't really translate that, but it is a sign that if they get it right, if the Lib Dems get it right over the next year, I mean, we could be in a four-party system at the next election.
And let's just talk about supposedly the two main parties, the Conservatives and Labour. How do they solve this? Do they have to choose a side? Or they have to go, well, we are going to be Leavers or we're going to remain?
I suppose that's what the
because trying to be this broad party for the whole nation is out of date now.
Well, as I've been saying for weeks on our Friday morning slots, you know, Labour has got... perhaps there was an argument for the sort of constructive ambiguity majority that Labour has had over the period of negotiation of the deal. But there most certainly isn't an argument for it anymore. And that's what the Euro elections proved. If, as is suggested, 41% of Labour Party members didn't vote Labour, they really do need to not just
expel a lot of people, apparently.
Not just expel people or brush over it, but actually think about why they are in the position that they're in. And they're in that position because you can't find...
But he's
on a fence.
still doing it. He's still fudging it a little bit.
Well,
you know, you get John McDonnell and Tom Watson saying a people's vote is the only way now, really. That has got to be, you know, sort of our next step. Jeremy Corbyn saying it's still potentially a long way off.
He did it again.
He almost plays a bit of a game. He goes quiet for a couple of days. Somebody else, people come out and say, yes, people referendum. And then suddenly he'll just come out and kibosh it. Oh, no, we're far away from that just yet. What game is he playing? I mean, it's
well, it's not a winning game, is it? And
no,
that's,
exactly.
That's the problem. But essentially, I think he is suspicious of the EU. He's instinctively a leaver, I suspect, whatever he might have voted in the referendum, and the people around him are as well. I mean, he's
a very great man.
He's becoming isolated. Interestingly, you know, when John McDonnell, who's always been his big supporter, as you say, seems to shift the position, Tom Watson, you wouldn't call his big supporter, but he is the deputy leader of the Labour Party.
Exactly.
Even people like, obviously, Emily Thornberry was the first person to say we need to change our position. Even Diane Abbott is saying, well, you know, we need to move closer to a people's vote. He's quite isolated at the top of the Labour Party, and he's isolated from the membership, actually.
Yeah. And talking about sort of leaders and how you translate that into getting support from your membership, obviously, we've got now 12 people wanting to be the next Prime Minister.
And I can tell you exclusively who the next one will be as well.
Go on.
We'll have a 13th one. It'll be Steve Baker. So you then have a Baker's dozen.
We had heard about that.
Oh, you've been working on that, haven't you?
I prepared that all night. Didn't
Very good.
Didn't get a wink of sleep.
Right. So, and obviously he resigned, didn't he, because of the withdrawal agreement, and, you know, and his support for No Deal and all of that. We've got Mark Harper.
Yeah.
Many will be saying, "Who's Mark Harper?"
Well, you're about to find out, aren't you?
He's coming on the show.
He's a former chief whip, so clearly, you know, a good man.
Well, isn't it odd that so many people think they can go for the top job? I mean, they all must believe...
So many men think they can go for
10
the top
men
Hang on, there's
so
a few
far,
women
11
as well,
men.
and there's a couple of women about to announce too, I think.
But what I'm saying is that what is the quality that they all think they share that makes them think they can lead a country?
Iain.
Everyone who goes into politics, I say everyone, probably 90% of MPs think that they could be Prime Minister and they could do a damn sight better job than the current one. And I'm sure Jacqui had ambitions in that direction. In fact, we've discussed this on our podcast on numerous occasions. And I think that, I mean, you look at the list of 12, and there are some big beasts there, but there are other people, and there is an argument sometimes that you need a fresh face, somebody who's going to bring in a totally different approach. But, of course, some of the cabinet ministers, Matt Hancock, for example, is trying to portray himself as a fresh face and say, oh, no, I had nothing to do with all of the divisions over the last year. Well, he was in the cabinet. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see how it shakes down.
What seems a little bit of a nonsense with the Conservative, what's going on with the leadership campaign, is that they all have to put No Deal on the table to try and become the next Prime Minister.
Well,
they have to say, No Deal will possibly on the table, but we know they're not going to get that past Parliament, and certainly not past the country. I mean, they're kind of all saying the same thing, but with hugely unrealistic.
Look, this is going to be a very interesting few weeks, because you're absolutely right. They have got to tell us how they would handle the Brexit negotiations. And so far, I have seen none of them with a convincing argument, because you're right that Parliament isn't going to sanction No Deal. Now, they could actually bypass Parliament. That would be a pretty big thing to do if they did do that. And, of course, if Boris Johnson became leader and went down this road, I suspect there would be 5 or 6 Conservative MPs, maybe more, who would vote against the government in a vote of confidence.
Yes.
Then there would be an election, and the Conservatives would be decimated in that election.
Yesterday. Yeah.
So it's going to be a very... I mean, if we think the first 6 months of this year have been very exciting, wait till the second half.
Yeah.
Of course, additionally, in the Tory party, the favourite hasn't won. So it's worth people putting themselves forward. I mean, David Cameron was sort of fresh-faced new person when he first stood. What I think is... What I find...
Of course, yes.
New mate.
Aston Villa.
Aston Villa.
I thought he was a West Ham fan.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? Same colours.
Exactly.
President Trump,
Right.
obviously, we've got to
Yes.
look ahead to next week. You know, it's an extraordinary week in politics, again, in this country next week. He's suggested that he may or may not meet Boris Johnson and Nigel Farage, his friends. Let's listen to what he had to say yesterday about his trip.
Nigel Farage is a friend of mine. Boris is a friend of mine. They're two very good guys, very interesting people. I think they're big powers over there. I think they've done a good job.
How much of a break of protocol would it be for him to meet a potential leadership contender?
I don't think it would be a break of protocol. Politicians, when they come on state visits, they often have private meetings. I think if it was a full-blown sort of meeting with TV cameras and everything, I think that would be quite something. But is it going to be an advantage to Boris Johnson? I'm not so sure.
If I was Boris's people, I wouldn't necessarily want to have that endorsement.
Why?
Well, because I don't think Trump is particularly... Well, I'm sure he isn't.
Except he is somebody who we're going to need, and if we have...
Oh, no, that's a different point.
No, but in terms of if you're going to think about who should lead this country, we do want somebody who can engender good relationships. You know, there's no love lost between Theresa May and he's constantly criticised her. So if he's now, fawning over our Prime Minister, it's not a bad thing for this country, it's a good thing.
I agree, and I'm not one of those people who would sort of boycott it, because I think that US is a major ally of ours. He is, however much I dislike him, the president of that country, and I think there needs to be suitable relationships. My point is that if you're fighting to be elected as the leader of the Tory party, I'm not convinced that having Trump's endorsement
and frankly,
is
Boris
a
has
good
got
thing.
if there is a Trump vote in Parliament, Boris has already
got
got
it already.
But it'll be. I'm just waiting for the first time Donald Trump utters the words "poor Theresa," because he's going to do something to humiliate her, because he always does.
All right. Well, guys, thank you very much. Up the villa, Jacqui.
Indeed.
God. Come on, you irons.
Look at that shot there with you two and Trump in the middle. I know. Yes.
We're never coming on again.
He's stalking you like he did Hillary Clinton. He's like, over your shoulder.